Thank you, Mr. President. A minute suspension to access the slides that I've prepared.
1 minute suspension.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege. Every month of August, I deliver a similar speech on the occasion of National Breastfeeding Month. The right to good nutrition is included in the Convention on the Right of the Child. And Mr. President, good nutrition begins with the act of breastfeeding. And of course, for a mother to breastfeed her child, she must also be fed well. Mr. President, I stand not just as a legislator, but also as a mother who has breastfed her children. This is a policy issue that I've been advocating for almost 20 years. The World Health Organization and United Nations Children's Fund, otherwise known as UNICEF, recommend that children initiate breastfeeding within the first hour of birth and be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months. Let me just share, colleagues, when I became a senator, it was still very common for hospitals to immediately offer either canned milk or water. And even water, Your Honor, has been deemed well, water is water, but definitely secondary to breast milk. So all of these practices we've tried to address. And as I deliver this speech, my staff is also checking on the compliance with our existing laws in all the health centers and hospitals across the country. Because when a baby is not initially exclusively breastfed, all the positive effects of breastfeeding are somehow diminished. Of course, they are still positive effects, but they are somehow diminished. And the success of a mother in breastfeeding is also affected if early on she is introduced, the mother is introduced to feeding her baby through canned milk. It's said and again, but it's worth repeating. Breast milk provides a baby not just immunity, but also addresses malnutrition. It is a baby's first kind of natural immunization. Many mothers, including myself, will attest to the fact that our breastfed babies had well baby visits to the doctors, which means nagbibisita yung anak namin sa ospital, hindi dahil sa doktor, hindi dahil sa may sakit sila, pero para dun sa kanilang routine check-up and immunization. And not because may sakit, because yun nga, they have immunity na panglaban nila sa sakit. And that is something that we always want mothers to understand. Kasi libre siyang panglaban sa sakit. Breast milk actually provides optimum nutrition, boosting an infant's immune system and brain development, as well as protecting them against disease and death, either during infancy or childhood. And what I'd also like to share is during the education, the EDCOM 2 meeting last week, it was our quarterly meeting, and in the presentation made by the group I belong to, which is the group in charge of early education and basic education, it was very interesting. That was what was highlighted as one of the factors that really affects the ability of a child to cope with the schoolwork and perform well. And I think I will not have to go into that the records have shown that our children are low performing in school. And one of the reasons attributed to it is their nutrition. And this goes back to the time that they were in their mother's womb and in their early years, yung 0 to 6 months, 6 months to 12 months, 12 months to 24 months, and so on. So we can directly relate the nutritional defects that an infant would have later on in their poor performance in school. And that is why I take time to explain the importance of breastfeeding, because it is also directly contributory to the performance we see in our children, in our children's schoolwork. Breastfeeding is one of the most effective ways to ensure child health and survival, as breast milk contains antibodies that prevent several secure and hygienic. This is the illustration I will give is when when we have areas that have to deal with calamities such as typhoons or even a volcanic eruption. And when a mother and child are displaced and they have to resort to feeding other than breast milk, the incident of infant illnesses and even mortality goes up, because the introduction of bottle feeding when the water is not clean then becomes a source of infection, and it has been directly known to be attributable to the death of infants. In fact, studies now show that there is a positive connection between breastfeeding and climate change. It is more sustainable as it helps reduce greenhouse gases and lessens the environmental impact of food alternatives. So sa madaling salita, yung breast milk eco-friendly. When a baby is given alternatives like formula, that goes through a process of manufacturing, which yun nga, contributes to greenhouse gases. Breastfeeding uses fewer resources and produces minimal or zero waste. A recent study suggests that a micronutrient, a sugar molecule called myo-inositol, found in breast milk, provides a significant benefit to the developing brains of newborns. The scientists at the Jean Mayer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University found that it increased both the size and number of synaptic connections between neurons in the developing brain of a child. So what is the Philippine situation? Well, based on the data of the National Nutrition Council in the Philippines, the exclusive breastfeeding rate is 34%, and the early initiation of breastfeeding is only 57%, contrary to the recommended levels. The target set by the Global Breastfeeding Collective is for 70% of infants in each country to be nourished through breastfeeding by the year 2030. Based on the 2017 Philippine National Demographic and Health Survey, the percentage of newborn infants receiving a pre-lacteal feed increases with increasing household wealth. Please note that the reason this is just 2017 is because this study is only made every 4 years. So we do hope that there will be available data very soon. Please note also that pre-lacteal feeding is the administration of any substances other than breast milk to newborn babies during the first 3 days of birth. Despite its negative health outcome, it is commonly practiced in developing countries, and it is a barrier for the implementation of optimal breastfeeding practices. Ito po sa Philippines, ang kadalasan ay tinatawag na Ito yung tubig na bigas and then hinahaluan nila ng asukal. Why would they do that? Well, I would suppose it is because of the misinformation that the mother's milk is not enough. And kung meron mang lumabas na gatas, ito ho ay kulay dilaw at kokonte. And this is called colostrum. So kung hindi alam ito ng nanay, kung hindi sapat ang information niya, di kakabahan siguro siya at iisipin niyang kailangan niya magbigay ng ibang klaseng pagkain. Kung wala naman siyang pera, ang ibibigay niya is tubig nga na may asukal. Palibasa ito yung tubig na galing sa bigas, akala nila maraming nutrition yon, but this is not correct. And then para naman dun sa may kaya at bibili naman ng formula, hindi naman ito kapareho ng breast milk na di hamak na mas masustansya. So either way, I feel like marami tayong opportunity to improve with information sa mga nanay. I just want to tie it in also to our SDGs. Breast milk is shown to affect several of the SDGs. SDG 2 on zero hunger, SDG 3 on good health and well-being, SDG 4 on quality education, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 10 on reduced inequalities, SDG 10 responsible consumption and production, SDG 13 climate action, and SDG 17 partnership for the goals. Just very briefly, hindi ko na iisa-isahin yon. Obvious naman yung zero hunger, good health, quality education, I just explained it. But on gender equality, precisely the reason why Senator Risa, the Deputy Minority Floor Leader, and I fought for the 105 days maternity leave, supported of course by our Minority Floor Leader who is a very supportive father of a breastfed child. We fought for this because we need to give mothers time to breastfeed. Kung hindi natin silang susuportahan by giving working mothers more maternity leave, the studies show that napapaikse yung time na nabe-breastfeed nila yung baby nila. SDG 12 happens to be my favorite, so I'll say something about it. Responsible consumption and production. So kung bibili pa ng gatas, o di meron pang delata, meron pang mga bote, and karamihan ng bote, plastic, hindi rin ganun kadaling mag-recycle noon. And unlike breastfeeding, as I said, it's very eco-friendly. So to recap, ang legislation natin in the Philippines on breastfeeding, it started with EO 51, which is actually passed way back in 1986, way before I became a senator. This is the EO 51 is the National Code on Marketing, Breast Milk Substitute, Breast Milk Supplements, and other related products, and it regulates the marketing of infant milk formula. Ito yung kadalasan na naa-abuse kasi well-meaning people na gustong mag-donate during calamities think na nakakatulong sila by donating milk formula, when in fact, it becomes a deterrent for mothers to continue breastfeeding pagka nag-umpisa sila ng formula milk. In 1992, still way before we became a senator, Republic Act 760 or the Rooming In and Breastfeeding Act was authored by the late Senator Ed Angara, the father of our colleague Senator Sani Angara. And this law adopts rooming in of infants with their mothers immediately after birth. This is such an important measure because this is the law that mandated that even if you're in a private hospital, kailangan kadikit mo kagad yung baby mo. Hindi yung nasa nursery ang baby, tapos ikaw nasa room or nasa ward, hiwalay kayo. So this really was a game changer. And then in the 14th Congress, of which I was already a member, I worked with the late Senator Angara to sponsor Republic Act 10028 or the Expanded Breastfeeding Promotion Act of 2009. This is the law that established lactation stations in all health and non-health facilities, including public and private offices, schools, PUV, terminals, shopping malls, and so on and so forth. So I'm always delighted when I see lactation stations in or breastfeeding rooms in all over the country. Nakakita na ako niyan sa estasyon ng mga Roro, kahit sa mga maliliit na malls, hindi kahit na yung mga sikat na mall na una na sila, pero yung mga smaller malls meron, yung mga airport natin finally meron. I know of horror stories and I have experienced it na kakatuking ka ng kung sino mang tao na gustong gumamit ng CR mo, pero ikaw as a breastfeeding mom, nagpa-pump ka doon and you're so stressed out because may ibang gustong gumamit ng CR pero wala ka namang ibang lugar kung saan ka mag-e-express ng milk. And this is precisely why we passed this law. The law also grants nursing employees paid lactation periods of up to 40 minutes for every 8 hours of work. Actually, konti yung 40 minutes. Hindi mo din malulubos ang pag-express ng milk mo within 40 minutes. But this was a compromise we know that we have to make sometimes, at least na umpisahan. So this is in addition to the meal breaks of employees. Other laws, as I mentioned, of course, is the 105-day expanded maternity leave law, RA 11210. And then there's also RA 11148, the first 1,000 Days Act. And then there's also RA 10821 or the Children's Emergency Relief and Protection Act, which sets standards for the protection of children and which includes breastfeeding moms, especially before, during, and after a disaster. So for the information of all our guests and our future resource persons, we have our own lactation station in the Senate. We used to have, and I will check if we still have the signages in the ground floor, such that when we have resource persons, they know that if they attend our hearings and they are nursing moms, they can use these rooms kasi they're open to all our guests. And then just to complete it, because this is required by law, when I was a member of the House, we also were part of the team that moved for the creation of lactation rooms in the House of Representatives, and this was continued by our now colleague, my brother Alan, when he was Speaker of the House, along with his wife, also then Congresswoman, now Mayor Lani Cayetano. So as I said, it's very important that we continue to educate people. So throughout the year, not just during Breastfeeding Month, my team, my Pinay in Action team, conducts seminars on women's health and breastfeeding promotions. These are normally done to barangay health workers because they are our frontliners. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the barangay health workers, the nutrition scholars all over the country, including, of course, the health officers of the municipalities and the cities, because it is in your hands na matututo yung mga nanay mag-breastfeed at alagaan ng baby nila. Also important is the human milk bank. I think this was about a year or so ago that we inaugurated the new and improved human milk bank in the Dr. Fabella Memorial Hospital. The Fabella Hospital is a pioneer in the National Breastfeeding Program, and so it was very timely that in-upgrade nila ang kanilang milk bank. We also have this in Taguig City. There is also in Makati City and a few others. And to conclude, Your Honor, as we celebrate Breastfeeding Month, I would like to thank many of our colleagues who are supportive breastfeeding fathers. And may your tribe continue. The majority floor leader is raising his hand in victory. And we are grateful because it is very important that women, mothers, get the support they need. So in the last collage of photos, you will see photos of the head of my legislative team, si Attorney Abby, naka-highlight dyan, expressing while working. And that is our goal, to normalize breastfeeding. So thank you again, dear colleagues.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, before we refer the speech of the distinguished lady from City of Taguig and Pateros, I would just like to make a very short manifestation, considering, Mr. President, that the first week of the month of August ay idinideklara po ng WHO o World Health Organization ang World Breastfeeding Week na may temang Let's Make Breastfeeding and Work. Dagdag pa ng WHO na you shouldn't require superpowers to juggle breastfeeding and work. Napakaganda pong tema nito dahil ito ay isang pagkilala lalo na po sa ating mga working moms na sa mata natin ay talagang mga indeed superheroes at superheroines, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Department of Science and Technology's 2018 and 2019 expanded National Nutrition Survey released in May 2022 revealed the following. 7 out of 10 or 71.6% of newborns were initiated to breastfeeding within 1 hour after birth. An increasing trend in exclusive breastfeeding was recorded from 48.8% in 2015 to 56.4% in 2018-2019. 52.4% of Filipino mothers reported to have continued breastfeeding their infants up to 1 year. Sama dito yung aking may bahay, ang aking asawa, Ginoong Pangulo. While only 33.6% continued breastfeeding up to 2 years. WHO and UNICEF recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life and up to 2 years of age accompanied by complementary foods. So how do we further improve our continued breastfeeding rates? This representation, Mr. President, supported the passage of RA number 11210, or the Expanded Maternity Leave Act, which grants 105 days of maternity leave with full pay and an additional 15 days maternity leave for solo parents. We were also one of the authors of Kalusugan at Nutrisyon ng Magnanay Act, or RA 1148, na binanggit po kanina ng ating distinguished colleague Senator Pia Cayetano. This requires an integrated strategy for first 1,000 days of child's life, including the implementation of support services to enable mothers and their infants to continue breastfeeding. Muli, Ginoong Pangulo, we urge relevant government agencies, including Department of Labor and Employment, to encourage, promote, and enforce the provisions of RA 10028, or the Expanded Breastfeeding Promotion Act, which grants break intervals to nursing employees, in addition to regular time off for meals to breastfeed or express milk, as well as the establishment of lactation stations where feasible. Again, we thank our distinguished colleague, Senator Pia Cayetano, for perennially or regularly championing this particular issue, Mr. President. I have heard her so many times, Mr. President, I lost count anymore. At kagaya nga po ng sabi ng WHO, you shouldn't require superpowers to juggle breastfeeding and work. Mr. President, we should find ways to continue to make this work for our superhero moms. Again, Mr. President, we shall continue to prioritize nutrition for women, infants, and children to ensure a relentless pursuit of eliminating hunger and reducing all forms of malnutrition. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo, and with that, I move that we refer the privileged speech of Senator Pia Cayetano and the manifestation of this representation to the Committee on Health and Demography. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President,